singer who Simon described as having a voice like liquid gold.
Which, coincidentally, is also what Simon uses to wash his face. Liquid gold. It's Alice Fredenham.
In the spring of 2013, a nervous beauty therapist from a small town in Hertfordshire walked out onto a brightly lit stage in front of millions of television viewers and, in the space of about 90 seconds, changed the course of her own life. Her name was Alice Fredenham, and for a short, dazzling window, she was one of the most talked about singers in Britain. Then, almost as suddenly as she arrived, she vanished. No farewell tour, no tell-all interview, no dramatic announcement. Just silence. It's the kind of disappearance that keeps a story alive online long after the television moment itself has faded from memory. Every so often, a new wave of comments shows up under her old audition clip, all asking some version of the same question. Whatever happened to her? So what actually happened to Alice Fredenham? Where did she go? And why did a woman with a voice good enough to leave Simon Cowell speechless choose to walk away from the spotlight rather than chase it? The answer isn't a single dramatic event. It's a slow accumulation of setbacks, anxiety, and a handful of deliberate choices that, taken together, tell a far more human story than usual, whatever happened to headline suggests. Alice Fredenham was born on April 14, 1985, in Harpenden, a leafy commuter town in Hertfordshire, not far from London. Long before anyone outside her hometown knew her name, she was simply a young woman with a love of singing and no clear plan to turn it into a career. She reportedly left school early, choosing to pursue music on her own terms rather than follow a conventional academic path, and for years she supported herself by working as a beauty therapist. Singing remained something she did quietly, mostly for herself, without any real expectation that it would ever become her job. That changed slowly, then all at once. In 2012, Alice worked up the courage to audition for The Voice UK. She stood in front of the show's rotating chairs and performed a smoky, jazz-inflected version of The Lady is a Tramp. It should have been a moment of triumph, but not one judge turned around. She left the studio without a single chair spinning in her direction, and by most accounts, that rejection stung badly. For someone who already struggled with nerves, being ignored on a national stage could easily have been the end of the story. Instead, it turned out to be the beginning. A year later, Alice tried again, this time for Britain's Got Talent. But she did something unusual. She told almost no one, not her closest friends, not her family, and, according to what she said on camera, not even her boyfriend at the time. Her reasoning was refreshingly honest. She explained to the judges before she sang that she hadn't told anyone she was auditioning. Because if things went badly, she wouldn't have to explain the failure to a single soul. It was a strategy built entirely around protecting herself from disappointment, and it says a lot about how much anxiety she carried into that moment. Whatever fear she felt backstage disappeared the second she opened her mouth. Alice sang My Funny Valentine, and the room shifted. Amanda Holden called it one of the most mesmerizing and sultry performances she had ever seen on the show. David Walliams told her she sounded like a goddess. And then came the line that would follow Alice for years afterward. Simon Cowell, not a man known for handing out compliments freely, told her that her voice was like liquid gold. The clip spread everywhere. Within days, Alice Fredenham wasn't just a contestant anymore. She was a viral phenomenon, racking up tens of millions of views online and drawing attention from audiences well beyond the UK, including a surprisingly enthusiastic following in the United States. For a woman who had been turned away by The Voice just months earlier, the reversal was staggering. Inevitably, the sudden fame brought scrutiny along with it. Because Alice had appeared calm and composed during her earlier Voice audition, some viewers and outlets speculated that her visible nerves on BGT were exaggerated for sympathy points, a deliberate performance of anxiety designed to win over the judges and the public. Britain's Got Talent's producers pushed back on the accusation, pointing out that they hadn't even been aware of her Voice audition until after the fact, and insisting her stage fright was genuine, whether or not the controversy affected public opinion. It certainly added another layer of pressure to an already overwhelming experience for Alice. The momentum carried her into the live semifinals, where the stakes and the anxiety climbed even higher. This time she performed Cry Me a River, made famous more recently by Justin Timberlake. It wasn't a disaster by any means, but it lacked the raw magic of her audition, and a few rough edges crept into performance. When the public vote came in, Alice finished fourth in her semifinal heat, just outside the spots that would have carried her into the final. The show's overall winner that year ended up being Attraction, a shadow dance troupe from Hungary whose emotionally charged silhouette performances captured the nation's imagination. For Alice, the elimination was a gut punch. She had gone from an unknown beauty therapist to a viral sensation with people speculating she might win an entire competition. And then, within weeks, she was out. Fans who had fallen for her voice were left wondering what would come next, half expecting a triumphant return of the debut single or a record deal announcement. For a while, it genuinely looked like that might happen. Behind the scenes, there was real industry interest. Sony Music reportedly signed Alice to a demo deal shortly after her Britain's Got Talent run, giving her a chance to record material and test whether she could translate her television moment into a lasting recording career. It wasn't a full album contract, but it was a meaningful opportunity. The kind plenty reality show contestants never get close to. It didn't last. Alice was eventually let go from the arrangement before any album materialized. No party gave a detailed public explanation, but the general suggestion floating around at the time was that her sound, vintage, jazz-leaning, unhurried, didn't fit neatly into what a major commercial label wanted to push at that particular moment. Whatever the exact reasoning, the effect on Alice was significant. She had already been uneasy about the pressures of fame, and losing the deal that was supposed to be her big break added another layer of disappointment on top of an already exhausting year. She kept trying to find another way in, chasing further opportunities and additional record deals, but she ran into rejection after rejection. Combined with everything else, the stage fright, the scrutiny, the abrupt exit from BGT, it started to wear her down. According to what she'd later share about her mental health, this stretch of her life pushed her toward burnout. She decided, quite deliberately, to step back and give herself room to breathe rather than force a career that clearly wasn't coming together on anyone else's timeline. It's worth pausing on just how common this kind of story actually is, even if it rarely gets told. Reality talent shows are built around a single explosive moment, the audition, the standing ovation, the viral clip. But turning that moment into a sustainable career requires an entirely different skill set. Touring, marketing, social media upkeep, constant public availability, and a willingness to keep performing versions of yourself for an audience that expects endless content. Plenty of contestants who generate huge buzz on a night never manage to convert it into lasting success, simply because of two things, being a magnetic on-camera moment and being a durable commercial artist, don't automatically go together. Alice's brief run with Sony reads a lot like a case study in that gap. She had the voice. What she didn't have, at least not yet, was a clear commercial identity that a major label knew how to package and sell at scale. That retreat didn't mean she gave up on music entirely. In May 2015, she performed at a fundraiser in her hometown of Harpenden held in support relief efforts following the devastating earthquake in Nepal. It was a small, low-pressure setting compared to a televised talent show, and it seemed to help her reconnect with why she loved singing in the first place, without the weight of judges, cameras, and viral fame hanging over every note. Encouraged by that experience, Alice began performing more regularly on a modest scale. Local venues, charity shows, intimate gatherings, largely outside the spotlight of national media. She also turned to crowdfunding to finance a debut album independently, since a traditional label deal hadn't worked out. Fans who had stuck with her since 2013 rallied behind the campaign, and by most accounts she comfortably exceeded her fundraising target. It was proof that even without a major label pushing her name, there was still a loyal audience who wanted to hear more from her. The album that eventually emerged from that effort was called Under the Covers, released in February 2017 through the independent label Cherry Red Records. True to her roots, the record leaned heavily on jazz, soul, and classic pop standards rather than chasing contemporary trends. The track list included covers like Wishing on a Star, Bluebird, Doctor My Eyes, Feeling Alright, Sunshine of Your Love, and, fittingly, a studio version of the song that started it all, My Funny Valentine. Reception among fans and niche music communities was warm. Listeners praised the clarity and warmth of her voice and the way the album stayed faithful to the intimate, old-fashioned style that made her audition so memorable in the first place. But warm reviews from a devoted fan base don't automatically translate into commercial success, and Under the Covers never had the marketing muscle of a major label release behind it. Without heavy promotion, radio pushes, or a wave of interviews, the album mostly reached people who already knew and followed her, rather than breaking into a wider audience. It remains, to this day, her only studio album. After Under the Covers, Alice continued to perform occasionally at smaller venues, private events, jazz clubs, and similar low-key settings around the UK, but the pattern of quiet withdrawal that had defined her post-BGT years continued. There were no follow-up singles with any real promotional push, no music videos, no consistent presence on social media. Her online footprint thinned out considerably, and eventually her official website went offline entirely. By the early 2020s, Alice Fredenham had become something close to a ghost in the public record, someone whose name still triggered a flood of nostalgic comments under a decade-old YouTube clip, but who herself had essentially disappeared from view. Journalists occasionally tried to track her down for updates. In 2023, a local Hertfordshire paper, the Heart's Advertiser, attempted to reach her directly for a follow-up piece and received no response at all. That same year brought the closest thing to an official statement anyone had heard from her camp in years. Cherry Red Records, the label that had released her one and only album, confirmed to inquiring press that Alice had retired from the music industry and wished to retain her privacy. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't explained in detail. But it was about as clear a full stop as her story was ever going to get. Despite that quiet retirement statement, Alice hasn't been entirely erased from the public record. One story that has circulated among her most devoted fans involves an admirer who, moved by her music, sent her flowers around Valentine's Day, a small tribute tied to the song that made her famous. According to fan accounts, she responded with a handwritten thank you note, a small but touching gesture suggesting that even in retirement, she remained aware of and grateful for the people who still cared about her work. It's worth noting this particular anecdote has circulated mainly through fan communities rather than confirmed reporting, so it should be taken as a charming rumor rather than an established fact. There have also been unverified suggestions in fan circles about her personal life, including chatter linking her to a member of a well-known music duo, and even a brief, poorly substantiated rumor in 2024 about a new song appearing quietly on streaming platforms with no promotion behind it whatsoever. None of this amounts to a confirmed comeback, and nothing from Alice herself or from Cherry Red Records has suggested she's planning to re-enter the industry in any serious way. It's tempting with a story like this to look for a single dramatic reason behind Alice Fredenham's disappearance. A scandal, a falling out, a hidden tragedy. But the more honest explanation seems to be less sensational and more human. Alice was someone with a genuinely extraordinary voice who also happened to struggle quite severely at times with performance anxiety and the pressure being constantly visible. The very qualities that made her audition so emotionally powerful, the vulnerability, the nerve she couldn't quite hide, the sense that she was bearing something real on stage, were the same qualities that made the machinery of a modern music career, with its endless self-promotion and public exposure, feel unsustainable for her. Rather than force herself to keep performing a version of fame that clearly didn't suit her, she chose repeatedly to step back toward a quieter life. She tried a major label, and it didn't work out. She tried crowdfunding and independent releases, and while fans loved what she made, it never reached a wide commercial audience. Eventually, she made peace with stepping away entirely on her own terms, rather than continuing to chase an industry that had already told her more than once that it wasn't quite the right fit. There's also something worth noting about the timing of each retreat. Alice didn't disappear immediately after her BGT elimination, and she didn't vanish the moment the Sony deal fell through either. Each time, she tried again first, a fundraiser here, a crowdfunding campaign there, a full studio album built from the ground up with her own fans footing the bill. That pattern doesn't look like someone running from failure. It looks more like someone testing, over and over, whether a version of a music career on her own terms might be sustainable, and gradually concluding that even the independent, low-pressure version still asked more of her than she was willing to give. That's a very different story than simply quitting, even if the end result looks the same from the outside. As of now, Alice Fredenham lives largely outside the public eye. She has no active social media presence to speak of, no ongoing music projects that anyone can point to with confidence, and, according to her own label, no interest in changing that. What she left behind, though, hasn't disappeared. Her Britain's Got Talent audition remains one of the most watched clips in the show's history, still finding new viewers more than a decade later. Her one studio album continues to circulate among fans who value her particular blend of jazz warmth and understated soul, long after the initial buzz around her television debut faded. Alice Fredenham's story isn't really a tragedy, even though it's often framed that way in headlines chasing the whatever happened to angle. It's closer to a story about boundaries, about a talented person figuring out, through trial and error and more than a little heartbreak, exactly how much of herself she was willing to give to public life, and choosing to stop there. Whether she ever returns to music in any form is genuinely unknown, but her voice, captured in that 2013 audition and later on Under the Covers, is still out there for anyone who wants to find it. And for a lot of her longtime fans, that's more than enough. What do you think? Do you hope Alice Fredenham makes a return to music someday? Or do you think she made the right call by walking away? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, check out the next video on your screen.